driving meaningful impact. Sopra Steria Next.
We're ready to start, so thank you everyone for joining us. Generative AI is set to change every aspect of our lives and work profoundly in the next few years. And that's not just a challenge of technology. It affects business models, it affects ethics, it affects workforce planning and service delivery. How, with such profound changes coming, can organizations plan for them, especially when the pace of change seems so rapid? Sopra Steria Next GenAI research has looked at the evidence and set out a roadmap for change, and today we'll reveal some of those findings and discuss how leaders and change makers can act today to prepare for tomorrow. I'm Giles Colborne. I'm a strategy director at Sopra Steria Next here in the UK, and I work with our C-suite clients to transform their operating models. I'm joined today by experts from across Sopra Steria Next's community. So, Richard.
Hi.
Richard Caddick's background is in strategic design. He's leading Sopra Steria UK's initiative in hyper-automation. Paul.
Hello.
Hi, Paul. Paul Taylor's background is in complex people and business transformation. He works with organizations to ensure that their people are ready for AI. Victoria, hi.
Hello.
Victoria Kulik is head of digital ethics. She helps organizations ensure they take an ethical and sustainable approach to AI. Susanna.
Hi, Giles.
Hi, Susanna. Susanna Machka's head of data consulting, and she sets strategy for large organizations, ensuring that their data can power their AI strategies and applications. And Tom.
Afternoon.
Hi, Tom. Tom Staley's Technology Advisory and Innovation Lead, and he looks at the implications of AI for CTOs. Welcome, everyone. Before we begin, for our audience, we'd love your questions. So you should see a box on the right-hand side of your screen where you can place questions throughout our discussion, and you can make your question anonymous if you prefer. So just type your questions as they occur to you, and we'll get around to answering at the end. But let's kick off our discussion. Tom, let's begin with you. Can you explain what AI is and what's new that's made it become the center of so much hype?
Sure. Thanks, Giles. So setting the scene, AI is a broad field of computer science focused on creating systems that can perform tasks that we would say typically require human intelligence. So these tasks include understanding natural language, recognizing patterns, learning from experience, and making decisions. Now, AI isn't new in itself, and it encompasses various subfields, many of which people will actually be familiar with. So these include machine learning, deep learning, and then most recently and most notably, generative AI. So if I just provide a quick intro to each of these, machine learning, first and foremost, involves the development of algorithms and statistical models that enable computers to perform tasks without being explicitly programmed to do so. So these algorithms are capable of learning from and making predictions or decisions based on data. Now, they might have some human intervention and be conducted under supervised learning, but largely we're talking about the ability for computers to make predictions. Think about product recommendations that you receive on Amazon or movie recommendations that you get on Netflix. These are generated based on data that those organizations have in order to get better product engagement and better user engagement on their platforms. Deep learning is actually best considered as a subset of machine learning and is actually inspired by the structure and function of the human brain's neural network. So this part can become very sciencey. But for this reason, deep learning algorithms are also known as artificial neural networks, again, a term that people might be familiar with. Here, consider autonomous vehicles. They have thousands of sensors and are processing huge amounts of data in real time in order to make independent decisions. Now, that might be around starting the car, stopping the car, and actually detecting objects which are placed in its way. So machine learning and deep learning are established fields. They're well recognized and they're practical applications for them that we're all interacting with day in, day out. Generative AI refers to a class of AI, however, that is slightly different and has obviously been the real focus in the news over the past 12 to 18 months. This class of AI is concerned with the generation of new content. We're probably most familiar with text-based use cases, but it's also used to create images, audio, videos, you name it, lots of different types of content. And the real breakthrough is that this content has been strong enough and good enough to actually resemble human created content. So if we consider these different types of AI, traditional AI, established AI, machine learning and deep learning, really concerned with the analysis and interpretation of data in order to make recommendations, where generative AI and the focus of this webinar is really concerned with the generation of new content.
So it's a sort of a creative type of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So Richard, what's the promise here then for creating services that are powered by AI? I mean, what does that look like? What does it look like for organizations to do things for customers or to support employees?
Yeah, cool. So unlike Tom, I'm not a technologist, so I'm not going to talk about the technology. I'm going to use different people lenses to look at what the technology can enable them to do. And I'll take a scenario which will be a customer services scenario. So something we're all kind of familiar with. You know, you ring up the telephone or you go onto a website and you go through a process there. So I'll look through that scenario from the different lens types. So first of all, let's think about the customer, the end user that has a need. In the future, and this is already being rolled out by some organizations, when you ring up on the telephone, instead of getting to an old IVR that puts you into a queue and you wait to talk to a human operator, actually there are kind of intelligent natural language IVRs now that allow you to talk in real time to the IVR and get the answers you need in a quick and personal way, allowing you to get what you need without the queues. If we then think about the kind of digital interactions a customer might have, so in line with the above, there's ever more human live chats coming on stream, and if you've been authenticated within a system or within the organisation through username and password or whatever else, actually give you real live answers based on your data and what the organisation knows about you. There's then a line of thinking that again, once you're going to a website, rather than having a website presented to you that's hard-coded, actually already understands you and your preferences, and the user interfaces become much softer, i.e. they're kind of malleable to the individual, which might be to the level of the type of heading you get or the tone of voice, as well as Tom was talking earlier about the products that you might be recommended. And then I think the other thing that's interesting, and the scenario I always take for this is kind of logging into your bank account or something like that. At the moment, often when you log into your bank account, you're able to see past transactions through statements. What if you could just type in to the system, you know, how much did I spend on groceries in the past year? Or break that down in even more detail. You know, what times of year am I spending more or less on groceries? It would be able to reach into the data that it holds on you and give you kind of interesting and meaningful answers. So that's the first user group. The second user group is then the operators. So when you do get through to and talk to a person, actually, how are they served up insights and summaries based on your past interactions? So rather than starting a call cold, or rather than them having to quickly read through, you know, quite a long history, actually they've just got a summary in front of them, which gives them enough information about you to start the call. The other side of that is thinking about the knowledge bases that contact center staff use. And imagine a knowledge base that's constantly improving based on customer interactions, the responses that they're given, and how satisfactory those answers are. And then finally, for operators, there's the idea of co-pilots. So the service operators themselves, if they're seeing certain trends or patterns or improvements in the service that they're delivering, how can they have the kind of power in their hands to improve the experience for all service users and enable that kind of ongoing continuous improvement? Which kind of leads into the next set of users, which are those that are responsible for delivering the back-end processes. And so how can those be improved? And so starting to looking at tools like data mining and process mining to start to look and understand at what's going on under the surface, and then bringing in tools like the machine learning and RPA to see how you might improve efficiency in those services. And then in the introduction, you said that I was looking at kind of hyper automation at the moment, and that's really when you start to look at a suite of different AIs working together and being orchestrated for better outcomes and to kind of continually improve the service itself, often with very little human interaction. You can set parameters and you can set goals for it almost, that it's then trying to find ways to improve the service for users.
So,
sorry, go.
No,
One more, which was then around the stakeholders, so the owners of the system or the service, and how can you give them kind of improved dynamic reporting. So rather than having to create kind of hard-coded reports about what's going on in the service, actually they can go in and interrogate in a natural language way to pull out the data that they're interested in.
So at almost every level, you're moving away from maybe the world we have today, where you open up a computer screen and essentially there's a lot of menus or links or things to click on, and it's almost as though you're entering into a dialogue with it. Whether you're a customer, whether you're whether you're a service agent, or whether you're a manager, the system is there saying, hey, I think this might be important to you, this might be useful to you, or I think, you know, it's Saturday and you've opened up the newspaper, here's the sports headlines rather than the business news. That kind of customized interaction.
Yeah, exactly that. And the thing that I've always got in the back of my mind is the experiences that we're having today with this technology are the worst they're ever going to be. It's only going to get better from kind of here on in. And I'm constantly holding that because it keeps me on my toes as to, okay, what's coming next? How do we prepare for it?
So the benefits to a business are what? The benefits to the business are automation, or the benefits to the business are performance?
Oh, well, both of those things. And also, if businesses are accountable for their reputation, then of course, if they're able to offer improved customer experiences, then that's a benefit for business. There's also things in there like, well, how can we reduce errors? And so how do we look for error reduction? So actually, when you're talking to a customer or where you're reporting on your data, it's never going through a filter. It always is just drawing directly out from that data and presenting it to an end user. And then also really interested in the idea or the fact that you can do things like you can bake policy and regulation into the models you're developing, so that however it's generating itself, however it's presenting itself to end users, it's absolutely in line with that regulation and that policy.
Okay, I mean, so increasingly intelligent, increasingly rich, and there you're talking again about this sort of orchestration idea of multiple layers of service and AI and people all being orchestrated by the AI to generate an impact.
Yeah, exactly that.
So Tom, I'm looking at the numbers for this. I was looking at stock market valuations yesterday, and they're just sort of going off the scale for when a company mentions AI, those things go up. I mean, is this just hype, or is it here to stay? Is it reality?
The hype is real, and the stock market valuation is a very prescient point. I mean, there's not an earnings call at the moment where it's not being referenced and it's being seen as critical to business strategy. In some instances, it's inflated expectations, and I'll come on in a moment to actually talk about the hype cycle. But we are seeing real revenue gains and real profit gains in certain parts of the market. So if we think about NVIDIA, for example, NVIDIA is seen as the foremost producer of AI chips, which are used to train AI models. Now, they're actually posting record revenues and record profits, and their share price, staggeringly, in the past 12 months has increased by 250%. So that has made NVIDIA the third most valuable company in the world and has overtaken Saudi Aramco. Now, I actually think this is a really interesting piece to pause on momentarily, because an AI chip manufacturer has become considered more valuable than the world's foremost producer of one of our most scarce natural resources, oil. So in some instances, yes, we're seeing huge stock market valuations, but it is actually a result and a product of real revenue gains and real profitability gains. So they are seeing the benefits from this movement towards AI. There's a number of software providers, however, which have also seen huge increases in stock market valuations, where I would say that those gains are yet to be realized. So those inflated expectations really take me towards the Gartner hype cycle. And so we've moved, I would say, from the innovation trigger towards what's referenced as the peak of inflated expectations, where we have early publicity producing a number of success stories where some companies take action, but many, the majority, do not, because of scores of failure. Now, the hype, again, isn't undue. If you take ChatGPT as a tool, the leading AI tool that I'm sure most people have had a play with at some point, is considered the fastest growing consumer internet app of all time. Now, it notched an estimated 100 million monthly users in just 2 months. For comparison, it took Facebook 4.5 years to achieve that. So it achieved it in 2 months. It's quite incredible. And it demonstrates that there is real demand for this service. People are interacting with it. They were active users. And this is a trend which looks set to stay. And certainly that's the bet that software and tech businesses are making. And they're leveraging the hardware, the AI chips from organizations like NVIDIA to make investments in the future, to build models which will impact, as per your intro, every part of our personal and professional lives. But there's a word of caution here, because if history does set precedent, then these technologies, which find themselves at the peak of inflated expectations, soon move through what we refer to as the trough of disillusionment, before then coming out on the other side through the slope of enlightenment, and finally the plateau, I should say, of productivity, which is actually where we see mainstream adoption of technology services. So right now, GenAI is at the peak of inflated expectations. We're seeing some companies that are recognizing true gains, like I mentioned, predominantly in the hardware space. And the software-oriented business, the use cases that we're seeing described affecting every aspect of businesses, certainly in line with what Richard was describing, these are still yet to be realized. And we're actually expecting, or rather the prediction is that GenAI will reach the plateau of productivity, where we see mainstream adoption and real business gains that can be quantified in 2 to 5 years. Now, that's an average. Some markets and sectors will move faster than others. But crucially, I think, as we see a lot of hype and we see technologies at the peak of inflated expectations, this is the moment to take a breath. It's the moment to think about your business strategy, your technology strategy, and actually where the most valuable and present use cases are for your organization.
Cool. I mean, that hype curve is something you just see every time a major new technology comes in, and there's that early assumption that it's going to fix everything, it's going to be really easy, and then the the trough comes when people are like, oh, we need to think about this and change the way that everything works in order to achieve it. And then there's that long slow climb out. So it'd be nice to shortcut that sometime and actually begin with that sort of thoughtful implementation. I mean, Paul, what's the sober response then? What are the no regrets moves that people can make in the next 12 to 18 months as they're learning how to integrate this properly into their organizations and the way in which people and their organizations work?
Yeah, thanks, Charles. So I think what I would say about AI is we've heard from previous speakers about how transformational it's going to be, but what I would suggest is that it's going to be transformational to people. Technology only exists really to make the lives of people better, easier, give us advantage, and people make up those organizations, and organizations want to improve the services they deliver, etc. So AI has that transformational ability, and that will only increase. Probably also in a way that we've not experienced today. If you think about and any organizations you've worked with about tech adoption, traditionally it's usually been you want to introduce something, you slightly warm the people up, you give them some training, you introduce the technology, and on they go. I think with Gen AI, we won't be able to operate like that. We're going to have to fundamentally shift the roadmap on its head from traditional technology introduction, because I think up until now it's been very transactional, and where this technology is transformational, we're going to have to be transformational in the way that we shift the people and organizations that are adopting this technology. I think we know already in terms of the roadmap ahead, there's significant resistance. Resistance comes from usually lack of knowledge, worried about what it might do for jobs, what it might do to your organization, worried about the ethics, the morality, the legal side of it, etc. And interestingly, there's an OECD employment outlook survey that says for the first time with the introduction of technology, it's the sort of traditional white collar workers over blue collar workers that are more worried about the introduction of this technology, because traditionally technology would manufacture something a bit more quickly, or it would automate robotically a process that someone was working at. Now it will be able to write the strategy for a 15,000 strong organization. So do you need a head of strategy anymore? Well, the answer is yes. You just have to employ them in a different way, and I think that's key to the roadmap for what organizations should expect. I think everybody's journey on this in an organization will be different. It depends on their knowledge of AI. It depends on whether they see it as a threat or an opportunity. But to get the transformational shift that you need, you have to shift the culture and thinking very, very quickly, I think, in an organization, and that's difficult. So where traditionally we maybe have introduced technology and then allowed the culture to shift to take best advantage of that technology, I think what we need to do is build trust and consensus early, probably before you introduce the technology, overcome the barriers that exist, the resistance that exists to the technology, show and demonstrate by lived experience that it can supercharge what people do, what we as humans do, what organizations do, as opposed to curtail kind of what we offer. And that will make the introduction of the technology far easier. I think also what we'll have to do is build agility into the way into roles and the way people operate in organizations, where traditionally we've had people operating in silos in different organizations doing one particular job. With the introduction of the various types of artificial intelligence, you may need people to shift and adapt what they're doing very, very quickly, and that's uncomfortable. So building agility into how people operate and how they carry out their roles is really, really important. If you think about the shift we've already seen in terms of technology adoption over the past, you think 20 years ago, everything was big waterfall technology programs. It took 2 years before a database came online. There was 6 months of training, etc., etc. We then moved into a far more agile way, which is really important about iterative improvements of technology, and actually workforces and people shifted to accept that iterative change in the technology landscape. AI has the will be far quicker, so you will require a greater degree of agility in the workforce to be able to get the benefit out of artificial intelligence as and when it's introduced. And I think kind of finally reimagining your operating model as an organization. So it's one thing introducing the technology and some of the mistakes you see from transformations of the past. You know, we know the stats about 2/3 of transformations fail because it doesn't stick to the original vision, doesn't achieve the original benefits that it set out to. And I think what we need to do is reimagine completely the operating model such that when you introduce AI, people's roles, the way things are set up, are able to shift and take advantage of that technology and get the best out of it. You asked about sort of no regrets. I think there's a whole bunch of no regret decisions you would make. The first thing I would say is start now. I really mean that. Start now. Start preparing your people. Prepare your strategy, as Tom alluded to earlier. With that's your tech strategy, your data strategy, your people strategy. You know, your customer service strategy. Understand the benefits you want to achieve, but start that work now. Reimagine your operating model. What does it look like in the future? What roles do people undertake? You know, think about the ethics and the legality of it. Give people the reassurance of it. And we'll probably come on to it a bit later, but invest in people, because there's a perception that actually investing in AI is investing in the technology. Yes, that's important. If you don't bring the people ahead of that technology introduction, you won't get the benefit in the same way as if you bring them along the journey early. So I think that's what I'd say.
And it sounds like at the core of what you're talking about, there are two things, right? One, there's understanding what benefits you're expecting to see. So where is the benefit? What is it that people no longer have to be involved with, and then bring people along on that journey. If I think back to previous generation, I remember working with car manufacturers when the internet first came in, and dealers being very anxious about it's taking away our ability to sell cars. In fact, what they learned was it was taking away the need for them to educate people about the product, and what they were getting was far better educated customers coming in and far better sales leads. So there's the benefit, and making sure that people see that benefit in their jobs, and that you've prepared them for that, you're training them for that, and you're helping them to reimagine, what does my job look like when I no longer have to do this. That's the no regrets move you're talking about.
Absolutely. So I think it's about redeploying people from what's traditionally been quite low value work to high value work. So where you've got people at the moment, maybe if you take sort of hyper automation, if they're inputting data or inputting kind of forms to feed into a process, do they really need to be that person that does that, or can the technology do that? Can that person be in a governance role that sits around that process that's happening? Looks and does QA at what comes out the other end, because that's always very important. AI is super effective, but we must also still be accountable for what comes out the other end of it. Humans must keep that accountability. So I think it's about the value of what humans are able to do, and shifting them from sort of low value repetitive work into that kind of higher value, better service orientated work. They'll have more time, more capacity to be able to do that, and that works actually at all levels, from you're a sort of a data inputter right up to a CEO. If you can take away some of those repetitive tasks, which we all have, everybody has them in every level of every organization, that we all wish we could get rid of. If you can, and you can refocus your time on the high value activities, the benefits will be significant.
That's amazing. Thank you. And a reminder, by the way, that you can ask questions in the chat. I'm seeing some questions come in. If there's a question you have seen come in and you particularly want us to dig into it at the end of this session, just click on like, and you can ask your questions anonymously or with a name. So yeah, please carry on asking questions. Susanna, all of this is powered by data. I mean, at the bottom of it, there's organizations are processing data, creating content out of data. What are the roadblocks? I mean, why that's preventing organizations from just getting started with that today?
Yeah, that's a great question, Giles. And I'm not here to rain on the AI parade that everyone's so excited about, but I have conversations with a lot of different people in a lot of different types of organizations, and fundamentally, unless you are a brand new organization, you are going to have some form of legacy IT to contend with, and you're going to have, the good old spaghetti networks and things that are very complicated to get data out of. It's not all going to be easy and clean to work with that side of data. So really we have to consider these things. And I think, the other speakers today have done a great job of pointing out all those different aspects as well. So really for me, it's getting the foundations right before we start trying to do anything too complicated. It's making sure that you do the work to get everything in the right place that it needs to be to get the really valuable insight out of things. And, as Paul said as well, it's really important that it's integrated into the rest of the business and the strategy and the people side of things. Otherwise, it just becomes, the latest bit of kit to play with and doesn't really bring any value back to the organization. So what we see a lot of is organizations struggling to get their data out of legacy applications or with their reporting, having unreliable data, the lack of standards and governance and all of those sorts of things. So, what I would recommend is really looking at bringing in a common data model, which is an approach that helps to bring together data from different applications, looking at the linkages between those data sets and how we can build out one model that is trusted, seen as a single source of the truth by the organization, that people feel that they can believe in that data, that has standards and governance imposed in it as well, and that is really understood by people within the organization. It's not just a technology model, but it makes sense to the people within the business, so they can ask questions of their data and get responses back that they understand as well. And that fundamentally means that you can use that data to inform your strategy, to work towards your objectives. And it doesn't just become, how many people have had to pull reports every month and you look at it and it might be red and it might be green and nobody knows what to do with it, and then it goes into the black hole and you do the same thing the next month. But it's really important to have that data that drives decision making, and that's really the way that we're going to achieve that.
So common data model is a way of looking around all of the different silos of data, none of which quite match up, and saying, okay, what are the rules? What's the translation? What data do we need to add so we can actually put these different silos together and make sense of them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure lots of people will recognize the fact that when you report on data within your organization, you might only be able to report on one thing at a time. So whether that's reporting on your risks or reporting on the costs, but bringing all that together is really where the power is in the data, of linking all those different, we call them hierarchies, together and looking at the similarities between them, how they might relate to one another, and how you can build that into a model, which then allows you to report holistically across the organization and not just singularly looking at one thing at a time and wondering, do these things impact each other? But actually getting the data that demonstrates that these things maybe do interact with one another and impact each other.
And that's not an AI technology. It's almost like putting the foundations down, or processing so that the raw material is there for your AI to be trained on, or to use as source material. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's the old saying, rubbish in, rubbish out, and that's exactly what you'll get. You could have the latest and greatest in AI, but if you're putting bad data into it, you're going to get bad data back out. So it's really important to put the groundwork in and to do those foundations in order to enable AI. I'm not saying don't put AI on your roadmap. Absolutely do. It's going to be fundamental in the next few years, but make sure that you've got all your ducks in a line basically before you get to that point. And that's really what we're helping organizations to do at the minute, is to look at the data that they already have, the value that sits within it, and how they can really augment that and enhance that.
That's another no regrets move, right? Because if you've got, say, an organization with one sales area has got its data in one format, another sales area has got its data in another format, you need a common data model to compare them, and that's value today. And you need a common data model if what you want to do is put some kind of customer service AI over the top of it that's been trained on that data in the future as well. So again, another no regrets move.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about the technical architecture? Are there similar things leaders should be putting in place if they're getting their data lined up today to prepare for tomorrow? What about the technical architecture?
Yeah, I would suggest that leaders really focus on understanding their data and getting it in a good state. So, looking at your governance, your standards, your documentation, and deeply understanding where your data comes from. Every organization generates a lot of data, but do you really understand the context that that's generated in, who the people are who are generating that data for you, the context that it sets within, not just data sets, but the data setting that sits around that as well. And this will really help you to understand how your data can help you to achieve the outcomes that you're looking to work towards within the organization. So setting those foundations for AI, really deeply understanding your data, and essentially, walking before you can run, making sure that you've got those standards in place before you know where you want to go. And fundamentally, it's a business problem. It's not a technology problem. It's really about understanding your organization's goals and where you want to go. It's very important that your AI tech strategy is aligned with your overall organizational strategy. These are not two separate things. One should absolutely speak to another. So understanding what you're trying to achieve with your data means that you can then use that data to inform strategic outcomes. It makes it meaningful. It doesn't make it that report that you throw away every month. It makes it something that really matters to your business and helps you to purposefully harness those AI capabilities and align the AI initiatives with the overall business objectives as well. We don't want to see the AI strategy somewhere over here and the business strategy somewhere over here. They need to be the same thing, and they need to be speaking to each other and working towards one goal.
Again, so it drives your decision making today that can be automated tomorrow.
Exactly. You don't have to do it all at once. You can do it in small steps, whatever feels the most comfortable, so that you can realize that value.
Thank you, Susanna. And Victoria, we've spoken about kind of separating hype from reality. I'm conscious that hype exists in every area of AI, and that includes ethics. Can you separate that hype from reality when it comes to the ethics of AI, Victoria?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Giles. I guess it's somewhat easy to do by starting, with that killer robots are probably not coming for us just yet. But like you say, there has been a lot of hype in AI ethics space as well. On the positive side, we have seen a lot of worry about what AI can do and what it's going to cause when it comes to the transformation of our jobs and also the transformation of the fundamentals of society. And I think drawing attention to the fact that technology can do that is an absolute win for a lot of ethicists who have been talking about it for years, but haven't really found the sounding board. Now, if we look back at 2023, we've seen a lot of letters calling for the stop of development of AI. Interestingly, often put forward by those who are actually in power to stop developing the AI. We've also seen the UK hosted summit in Bletchley back in November, again talking about these massive existential risks. And while I wouldn't want to downplay the role that AI may once play in the demise of mankind, I'd probably want to stress that there is quite a lot of risk that is materializing day to day, and that's the one that we should really be focusing on. And we know some of the key categories that we'd be looking in are around fairness and the discrimination that these solutions can be bringing. And we can say, well, humans are biased too, so what is the problem? The problem is that once you start putting so much data and you start scaling these solutions, it's not just an individual human impacting an individual human, but a system impacting wider population because of the data that you've fed it and because of the way you've designed it. So we've got massive opportunity to counteract that, but equally a massive risk of discrimination creeping in. We have risks concerned with privacy, and we've seen that with ChatGPT, for example. A lot of people not really understanding that you should not be putting personal or company data into it, and suddenly the data ended up being accessed by those who should not be accessing it. And I think for me, one of the unique risks brought in with generative AI specifically is just our level of over-reliance on technology. I think we've seen with some of the news that around the post office scandal, for example, that we tend to trust computers. And if a computer says X is true, we tend to believe that it made the decision on the basis of data, and it's obviously much more clever than us, so it's probably right. And I think while in traditional use cases, we might be able to say, well, okay, well, this number doesn't look right, or let me have a look. I think with tools like ChatGPT, it's communicating with you in an English language, something that you understand, and it often is rather authoritative in the way it communicates back with the user. So I think for me, the risk definitely lies in us believing what it says. And again, we know of the phenomenon of hallucinations, so the system producing information that isn't factually correct. And again, if you're not particularly skilled in a certain discipline, you might be relying on ChatGPT to give you some information. You may make a decision on the basis of that, but there isn't an element of thinking, well, let me double check. Let me just figure it out. And obviously now that's been remedied somehow by certain notices that say, well, it can produce inaccurate information, but it's not stopping people from overly relying on it. And we've seen a lot of somewhat funny press around what that can look like, and it can be scientific articles that clearly have passages copied and pasted from ChatGPT. But again, when stakes are higher, I think it's really, really important that we do put that thinking cap on and realize that technology is not there yet for us to trust it 100%. That we still probably should have that human in the loop, should just double check that we definitely agree with what's being said.
So real problems are things like bias in AI, and as you say, that any technology just accelerates and magnifies what's already there. So if there's bias in what you're feeding your AI, you're going to accelerate and magnify that across hundreds, thousands, perhaps millions of people, and the impact could be enormous. And also that need to present AI in a way which encourages the user maybe to be a little more critical of it. So, I think of a example we'll all be familiar with of things like GPS sort of leading drivers into dead ends or heaven help us off a cliff. And it's the difference between saying, turn right here to you should see a turning on your right. That just simple cues that allow people to maybe take a more critical approach to what's going on, and that's users. But that also sounds like that means business users as well, and the people who are ultimately responsible for setting up the AIs themselves. One of the it seems like a good point to bring up that question of sustainability, which I know has already come up in the questions that we've been asked by the audience. And by the way, if you've got any questions arising out of this discussion, now's a good time to add them to the chat. But Victoria, what are the sustainability consequences of AI, automation, and data centers, and just the power that's needed to do all of this and to simulate human decision making?
Yes, I think the consequences are vast. I think the biggest issue is that we don't really know, because a lot of the data about how much energy we need to train some of these models and how much water we need to cool the service is just not available. So I think there's a big issue of transparency around what the sustainability implications are exactly. And there's a lot of research that has been trying to approximate some of it. So, for example, an estimation that in a casual exchange with ChatGPT, where you pose between 20 and 50 questions, you need about 500 milliliters of water to cool down the server, or in about 15 question conversation, you use as much energy as it takes to boil a full kettle of water in the UK. Now you might think, oh, that's not really a lot, but when you reflect back on the past year of your ChatGPT use, scale that by the number of users it actually has, that suddenly grows to be absolutely massive. And again, this is us just talking about interacting with an end product that's already been trained. But when we start thinking about the training and the retraining process, that grows absolutely massive. And again, with some of the estimates that we've got available, we know that, for example, in the US, there has been a revision to the growth projection for energy consumption, and that's doubled for the next decade versus what was originally thought. And I think, as users, there's probably some responsibility on us too. Think, do you really need to ask ChatGPT to do that? kind of recognizing, probably none of us would go and litter in the street these days. So I would like people to start thinking about it in that way. Do you really need to interact with it all the time for the simplest tasks? But then again, there's also a lot of responsibility, first and foremost, to just provide that transparency around what the energy use actually is. What is it that we're talking about? And starting to think about whether we can minimize it. But again, it starts with actually knowing what we're dealing with. And I think regulation is starting to catch up with some of these requirements. I think AI Act will start introducing some of that reporting for those who develop these most sophisticated AI systems to actually tell us what is it that they're doing. And usually these numbers are so huge that hopefully it will trigger action to start reducing them.
And I'm starting to see that. I'm starting to see people come forward with new models like Mistral, which are considerably lower in their energy demands than the ones that have gone before. So there's something here for strategists to look at in terms of what the choices, the tech choices that you make could impact your company's net zero strategy as well.
Absolutely, and I think I've read a good metaphor that I really like to use around here is that often you don't need generative AI, you don't need ChatGPT. It's there and it's easily available. That's great, but it's like using Lamborghini to deliver a pizza. But you can deliver pizza on a bike, or in a very, very cheap car. You don't need the top end technology to do certain tasks for you. I think it's very appealing, obviously, because it can do a lot of cool stuff. But when it boils down to it, what I would appeal to is just reason and thinking about the actual business problem that we're trying to solve. And then looking at what is it that we actually need to solve it? Is it really that top range kind of tool, or is something much simpler available? And often is the case that that simpler thing will also introduce much less risk. So again, recognizing the absolute potential and the opportunities that generative AI brings, but it probably is not needed to power a chatbot that effectively has two options for a user to click. So just appealing to you, make considerate choices and going back to the actual problems that we're trying to solve first, rather than supposing what the solution is.
And I'm seeing that as a thread actually through what you've all said, right? Is understanding your business strategy, understanding the value that you want to deliver is going to mean that you choose exactly, put thoughtfully where you use the AI, so it's just enough AI to have an impact. It's going to help you to understand how you integrate it into your operating model better. It's going to help you understand how you integrate it into services better, the technology choices that you're making, and the data that you need. So it's that start with why. Start with a deep understanding of what is the value that your organization is seeking to deliver, and you can run that thread through people, through customers, through data, through process, through purpose, each one of those things. Thank you, everyone. I think we've got time for a few questions, and we've had some brilliant questions in the chat. So let's move on to that. We've got a question here, an anonymous question here, but how could a national government, and I think you could take this, not just for a government, but you could, if you're looking at private sector, you could look at any kind of central organization, use AI to have a better sight of data that's held across authorities. And how could that be used to inform national decision making regarding policy and funding locally? I wonder, Richard, do you have any thoughts on the implications of federalized organizations to use AI to manage decision making better than they have been able to in the past?
Oh, it's such a good question, isn't it? And it leads me down so many kind of rabbit holes around how can you improve kind of democracies even through the better surfacing and sharing of data. I guess to do that, you need something akin to the common data model that Susanna was talking about, and you'd need to have the willingness and the intent for people to want to share that information and work together. So I wonder what the kind of incentivization structures are that sit around such a thing. But I can totally imagine and see the benefits of it helping UK society.
And Niall Smith's asked a related question, Susanna, around the difficulty of just operating across paywalls, and the fact that some of the information that maybe you'd like to rely on is behind a paywall. And does that mean that we're left with the inaccurate stuff or biased stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real challenge, I think, and something that we're going to come across more and more at the minute is that, if all the good data is held behind paywalls, then what are we training AI on? And I guess it really comes down to understanding and owning your own data and what you're trying to achieve from that before you start trying to augment it with other sources. But there is value in data, and it shouldn't be treated as though it can just be free and available all the time. I think there has to be an understanding that there is value attached to that, and at times it may be monetized, and there may be the requirement that we'll have to pay for these things, but the value that you get out of it, if it is in line with your strategic objectives and all the other things that you're trying to achieve, it should be worth it then as well. But it's very possible to have agreements in place where you can share data and create these open platforms of data where the benefits far outweigh the benefits of keeping it all to yourself. The benefits of sharing far outweigh that.
So both things are true. I mean, one, companies that have unique data have and uniquely high quality data have the ability to build unique services on top of that. I did some work a few years ago for the British Medical Association that was using some of the BMA journal data to provide advice to clinicians about the scientific foundation of different treatments and the recommendations that they were making. I can imagine that service being far more elegant if it were driven by AI. And that's an example of using your paywall data, the data that you own, to create a unique and valuable service.
Yeah, absolutely. There needs to be conversations between humans in these cases to understand what you're using the data for, and in this case what the greater good might be. And there's the opportunity to monetize things in the future, to sell those services. But if you can solve large problems in society nowadays by combining these data sets, there's probably a very serious conversation to be had around how that can happen and how we can achieve that.
And there's value in aggregating data as well. That was the other thing that you were saying. I think of it, the example of having access to, for instance, insurance quotes across multiple platforms means that you're able to find the right quote for you easily today. In future, that sort of aggregation of data, that people saying, well, I've got my unique proprietary data, but if I put it into the hat, we can get a better result as a market or as a group of companies or organizations. That sort of thing is going to be moderated by AI, as opposed to human operators trying to stitch all of it together. So that's the other end of federated data and organizations looking to share.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm veering into Victoria's space of the AI ethics. I'm sure she's got a lot of opinions on this as well.
Oh, well, Victoria, did you want to add anything to that?
I think I can hold off for now. Just not to monopolize just that one question. I think we've got a few more questions, so I'll let you carry on, Giles.
So one of the questions I saw early on was just about the adoption of AI and the need to take customers on a journey. Eddie Farish asked, automation AI only 3 to 6% adoption. How do we take decision makers? He's called them out as baby boomers on a transformation journey. How do we help decision makers to see what's possible here? Do you think there's a generational thing here, Paul, perhaps?
I don't know that there's a generational element to it. There's probably just lived experience with the introduction of different technologies over the years. I'd perhaps put it in those terms. I think regardless of who you are, this technology will be, as we said earlier, it will be transformative, and the way in which you approach its adoption has to be transformative. So I think whoever you are, whether you're sort of the CEO of an organization, or you're a data inputter that's kind of working part-time in an organization, there are ways in which you can take people and start people on this journey. And there's something we've been using at Soprasteria Next with clients right across Europe, and it's the 3 E's. So we educate, we explore, and we energize. So whoever you are, we demystify AI. We educate about what it is, what it can do, what it can't do, what you need to be worried about, what you shouldn't worry about. So we just really bring it to life in a very human way. Explore, that's about kind of getting people to invest themselves on this kind of continuous innovation path, so they're happy to kind of keep moving down this path, and to use it to build lived experience, use it in your professional and your personal life to make something better, and you've got something to talk about, you've got a reference point. And then finally kind of energize, build across networks, build change networks, introduce kind of AI universities. And I don't mean in the sense of getting degrees, but centers of kind of excellence that really promote this stuff, and just really build a kind of a rolling change wagon of adoption for AI. So I would always educate, explore, energize, regardless of where you sit in an organization. Move through those 3 E's, and it's a good way to starting you down that road.
And Paul, we've talked about AI as being a technology problem, a business problem, a user problem, but it seems to be all of those. So what's your recommendation for people to put together a strategy and try and make sense of so many threads?
Yeah, you're right. It takes every single capability, every person in an organization to really drive this forward and get the best out of it. So Soprasteria offers an AI hothouse. Hothouse is a kind of a focused and really fast-paced environment where you sort of understand a problem and together we find a way forward. What it is for kind of senior change makers and managers, and it's getting everybody in a room, understanding the issues, understanding a roadmap, giving you confidence in what steps to take next, demystifying AI, as we said earlier, and setting you on that journey. So my suggestion, if you're stuck as to know what to do, an AI hothouse is a really good, focused, concentrated way of understanding a problem and building momentum to move forward.
That's amazing. Well, look, we're just on time there. So thank you, first of all, to everybody who asked questions. If we didn't get to yours, we'll certainly try and follow up with that outside of the session. I think it's clear from today that an AI roadmap is not out of the realm of possibility for any organization. In fact, it's something we should all be considering. Equally, though, I think we've highlighted it's not just something that exists in your technology department. It's not just something that one team owns. As you said, Paul, it's something that you need to get multiple perspectives on to come up with a sensible strategy that plays out well over the next couple of years, and avoids the roller coaster of the hype curve that you were talking about, Tom. So if you're looking for those next steps, then please contact Paul about an AI hothouse. Meanwhile, everyone, thank you very much for joining. It's been a great discussion. Keep an eye open for our next webinar in a couple of months' time, and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Driving meaningful impact. Soprasteria Next.